put it into perspective of what people deal with on a daily basis down there. And what's awesome about Nicaraguans is, oh my goodness, people are so happy, and it's probably the same in Zambia, right? Like it's when you have so little, every little thing means so much, and here it's so easy to take things for granted. I do it every day.
Welcome to Connecting the Dots. I'm your host, Jessica Carice, and today we have a special guest, Alex Tuck. He is the founder and managing partner of Tuck Consulting Group. We recently partnered up together. I'm on his project management bench. Alex, he's in Vermont, and you're probably the only person I know who's from Vermont. So, Alex, give us a little introduction of yourself. Tell us all about Alex.
Yeah, you bet. So since I'm the only person that you know from Vermont, we were just in the path of totality, and everyone went crazy here. We grew 200,000 people in a 650,000 person state overnight, so that was pretty fun. Anyway, my name is Alex Tuck. I started Tuck Consulting Group in 2013. I wanted to work on Obamacare, and I was like, I'm going to start a company and do this thing, and we'll go into more detail later on that journey and what happened there. But started as an independent consultant, and then decided I wanted to grow a consulting firm 5 years ago. And so we've been at it, grew to about 60 consultants on our bench right now, and doing it all from my little house here in Underhill, Vermont. So pretty fun.
Nice, nice. That's so interesting. So you wanted to just get into Obamacare. Like what about it sparked your interest? Like what's
Oh
the
my gosh.
backstory?
Yeah, there's like, I mean, there's a very long backstory, and it all stems from my childhood and all that stuff, and we'll cover all that. But um, basically, short story is, I was working in finance, didn't love it, went and started a nonprofit. We lived in Central America for 4 years, needed to come back and do something that generated revenue again. Saw that Obamacare got passed, went into project management and started my company. So I wanted to, yeah, like that's the 20-second version of like the crazy journey there. But at the end of the day, Obamacare was interesting because it was making a difference in people's lives. It was like one of the, like, it was large piece of legislation that had ever been passed. It was sweeping. There was a lot of money being thrown around at it, and there's, as we know, like with the government, that can be a good thing or a bad thing. And so I wanted to help like direct it, at least in here in Vermont. And it was really cool project. And it was meaningful, and we did change people's lives pretty significantly. So
Wow, yeah.
that was the goal.
Yeah, you know what's interesting? So I've been doing a lot of research about entrepreneurship and starting a business, and one of the key things is jumping on an emerging trend. So you literally hit the right opportunity to just launch your own thing on an emerging trend such as Obamacare. Like that's really
Yeah, and what's
awesome.
interesting about that too is it's not just like with the Obamacare thing; is also with project management. So, I mean, I was sitting in my little shack in Nicaragua after a long day of being out in the field. We were distributing microloans, and so we had been walking around all day. And I came back, and I'm like, all right, we're doing research and stuff. And this wasn't just one day; it was over several weeks, but. I was like, all right, what am I going to do next? Right. Like we've got the organization in a place where it's sustaining right now. We have employees here in country. So now I can step back from my day to day with this nonprofit where I'm, pouring money into it and doing it for free. And like now I'm ready to start into my next part of my career. What can I do? And the trends at the time in 2020, 2012 were like really geared towards project management. We've been doing project management forever, right? But we haven't been doing it the way that we've been doing it. Project Management Institute really has started to establish itself really well around that time, and it was one of the hottest jobs in the country, in the world. And so it just seemed like the right time. And then starting a project management company in 2013, like most people would have been like, maybe not. But like now, I mean, we've grown, I don't know, 1,700% during COVID. You know, like it's still like a very, very hot topic right now and only growing. So
Yeah, it is really hot. Like a lot of people transition from being teachers and stuff to entering project management during COVID. It's and
yeah,
then even it's interesting. I had posted a job last year just for like a project coordinator.
yeah,
Alex, there was like 1,000 people that had applied.
yeah,
Like,
yeah. Every time I post a job on LinkedIn, I get, I don't know, I do paid ads on LinkedIn, just so I get a little bit higher quality of candidates. And in 3 days, I have 800 positions,
it's
like
insane.
800 applications, and thank goodness for LinkedIn's like auto sorting and stuff, and because I mean then it gets me like 250 people that are pretty good, and then we still have to work through those folks. So anyway,
Yeah, it's
yeah, it's hot right
insane.
now
It's
for sure.
insane. Yeah, and then even now you have Chat GPT. It like makes it harder to like sort through stuff because everyone is using it for enhanced writing. So
Yeah, yeah, but I mean, I will say that once I get to the interview, it's very clear whether someone's actually run a project or not, right? Like
Mhm.
that's the art of project management is like you can tell if you're a good project manager or you've led project management teams, you know whether someone's actually done it, you know the right questions to ask. Um, as opposed to just, someone might have been in the role forever, right? But like, are they going to actually like track down a risk and actually drive it, or like are they going to be able to inspire someone that really doesn't want to respond to them? That's the hard part, um but that's the fun part about what we do. So
Mhm. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So now we're going to have to back up all the way. So
hmm
tell me about your childhood. Tell me about your interests. Tell me about your
yeah,
family, just the whole paint the picture so I can like visualize it for myself.
yeah, it's so interesting. I've been talking about it more. My joke to everyone is I grew up as a white male in the South, and then I realized that my mom was from Cambodia. She was a refugee from there, and there's like all of that stuff to unpack, right? But um, anyway, my stories always start with parents and grandparents and stuff. So um, my mother was a refugee from Cambodia, came here during Pol Pot regime right at the beginning. I could tell a whole story about that, but like basically she got out like within the first week of the Pol Pot regime taking over the country. She was one of the few family members that was actually able to escape pretty early. Was in a Thai refugee camp for a period for about a year, and then came to the U.S. And eventually resettled in Richmond, Virginia. Um, the rest of her family was there through the whole killing fields for 5 years. Almost all of them survived, and that's a whole story for another day. But it definitely shaped my childhood. I heard a lot of stories throughout that, and all the influencers, those that made it to this country, not just my mom, but like all my aunts and uncles and grandparents who lived through all that. Like that played a huge role, indirectly with how I just viewed life, right? And then my father, white male, grew up in northwestern, very rural northwestern Tennessee, and he was, I don't know, he was probably like an eighth generation northwestern
Oh
Tennessee
wow.
dweller. So like very early settler, and but grew up in a very rural, poor area of Tennessee. My grandfather was the first person in his family to even think about, like, to even get good grades and like think about being able to go to college. And he started to go to college at University of Tennessee Martin for like a year, and then got job offers from General Electric to like be a
Mm.
salesperson, and then that was his way out. And so he left, and so my father and his family like traveled all around the country, um, and eventually settled in Richmond, Virginia as well. And so my dad was sort of wild, and again grew up like, so my grandfather had assets, had like he had some like early generational wealth, but like he was establishing that, right? And they didn't really know how to deal with all that stuff. Common story. And so, my dad didn't have a lot of money. He worked at a restaurant. My mom met at the same restaurant that my dad worked. Like they worked at a Shoney's, I think,
Oh,
and that's where they
Shoney's.
met.
Yeah.
Yeah, Shoney's. Heck
Yeah.
yeah, that little salad bar. So anyway, they met there, fell in love, eventually got married, and had me and my brother. And like my mom tells stories about like how she used to like write checks where like for diapers and like didn't know if they were going to bounce or not, like that kind, it was like that kind of upbringing. And plus like growing up in Richmond in the late 90s, early 2000s, like by the early 2000s it was less sketchy, but like it was the murder capital of the country at the time. Like it was just really wild, a wild place to live in poverty. And so that story like really, that whole upbringing like really defines who I am and like some of the challenges that I face. Like when they talk about like adverse conditions, right? As a child, like we definitely had a lot of them, but what was cool is I had an amazing family, really caring parents, really caring grandparents all around on both sides of the family, and that made the resiliency like a possibility for us. So anyway, the typical story, like got straight A's all the way through, went to magnet school. But I was a first generation like college graduate. And so because of that, I didn't really have influencers like in my family telling me, all right, like here's how you do these things, and like here's how you go to college, and this is why you should choose this career. And so it was like, all right, I got straight A's, I can go pretty much wherever the heck I want to and do whatever. So what am I going to do? And so I went into finance, right? I was good at math, went into finance, and I got recruited to run in college. And so I had to choose between D1 and D3. D1, I was going to be like the worst runner on the team that would make it, and then like D3, I'd be like one of the best runners in the region. And so I was like, I'd like to be good at in my little pond. And so I went to this little liberal arts school called Roanoke College, got a finance and econ double major there, and just did that for a little bit. Went to financial services after that, and realized that my parents taught me how to get good grades and pushed me as best as they could, but they didn't know that they needed to remind me that like I needed to find something that was fulfilling in my life. Not that finance can't be fulfilling, right? But it was like helping rich people get rich and me making a lot of money doing that, right? And so it wasn't for me. So anyway, that's sort of my childhood journey. But then that led me to starting the nonprofit that I started, because I was like, hey, I'm going to take all this money that I made working in finance, and I'm gonna dump it into this nonprofit, go live in Latin America for 4 years, and help stand up a microlending company. Why not? Right. So anyway, that was sort of like the childhood journey, but like that was sort of like that boomerang effect back to like my parents teaching me, hey, you need to be helping others, you need to be doing these things. And so like I was able to tap into that finally after like being out on my own and figuring out some of the things that they hadn't been able to help me with. So yeah, pretty fun though.
That's so crazy. It's so funny. I would have never guessed that you grew up in low income and like in a, murder capital of the
Yeah,
US at all, just because like you radiate so much positivity, like, and you come across like very, very happy, and like I can't describe it because I grew up in Baltimore, so
sure,
grew up around similar conditions,
sure.
and people that have grown up in that type of area, their stuff happens, there's a lot of people I went to high school with that aren't here today, so it's like I really admire just the energy that you radiate, and your smile and everything. Like I would have never guessed that was your childhood.
No, and what I find interesting is that like I didn't know that about you, Jessica, right? And so there are so many people that had similar experiences to us that um, we all sort of gravitate to one another too. And I don't, I don't know if you feel this way, but I feel like, okay, there's this resiliency that happens from that. There's just like this appreciation of life too. And even though I grew up in those conditions, I went and lived in Nicaragua, like where the average income was like $2.50 a day. And I worked with people, like giving loans to people living on less than $2 a day. Talk about like a wake up call about what is good in your life and not good in other folks' lives. Like that is the way to do it. And so anyway, I just think you have a different view on life sometimes when you have come from that and you experience. I mean, look, I live on an acre farm. I run a very successful business now, and it's not just because of my work. It was like there's so much luck with it. There's so many people that have helped along the way. It's like I'm so fortunate just to be here, to be able to have this stuff, right? And so that's why I radiate, positivity. I just feel that I really feel like I'm so fortunate, and same with you. I can tell, and same with others as well. So
Yeah, yeah. It's funny because there are some times where like I would feel stuck in my past, like there are certain things I went through and it was just like trying to push forward with that resiliency. You kind of get into like a survival mode.
oh yeah,
And then there's like a delay realization where you're like, wait, I'm not in survival mode anymore,
yeah,
but then it's like, okay, let me process so there was like a lot of internal work I did to so that I could get to the place where I'm like looking in front of me, I'm like, oh wow, I'm very, 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 very blessed, did you
oh
ever
yeah,
have those moments where like
yeah, for sure. I mean, I think you've talked about it before. There's obviously everyone is subject to like some sort of imposter syndrome, but I don't know, as a person of color, right, coming from poverty, coming from these adverse conditions, like I think you can relate. Like it's so easy to fall victim to like what your conditions used to be, right? And I think we've made a lot of progress in certain areas as a country, as different communities and stuff, but there's still a long way to go. And so it's very easy to fall back into that like darker place. And I you have to work on it. I mean, you have to work on all those things. And even though you're in a good place right now, right? Like you still are. Like I'm constantly like trying to learn new stuff and work on things and think that like it's so funny. Like it's just I talk to all my friends. Like we're out running together and we're all like, oh yeah, like talk to the therapist about this. Like just like trying to process things and um it's just that all comes from our childhood, right? But it also comes from our current trauma that we're dealing with too. So it's like it's very interesting. This whole like the way we progress in our
yeah,
in our lives
yeah,
and the stuff that we carry still when we think we forgot it. So
I know, right? You have like the littlest thing that will trigger some memory. You're like, oh my god, I thought I moved past that, like
that's right. But I also like I so appreciate that too, right? Like oh my goodness, I just think about you know like some of the fights that I had with my parents and like some of the like the scary stuff that I saw like when I was growing up in my neighborhood, right? Like it was wild. Like people getting shot like blocks away.
oh
It's
my
like
god.
what? Like oh my god, it's so easy to just be like, oh yeah. I mean, like if that happened in Vermont right now, goodness gracious,
Yeah,
So
that'd be
it's
a huge deal if that
it'd
happened.
be like front page news. But yeah, it's crazy. So
Yeah. So, what prompted your like idea of going to Nicaragua and setting up a micro lending company?
yeah, just like crazy like idea one night. No, we so my wife. So I graduated. What had happened? So like I graduated a couple years early, or not a couple years early. I graduated a little bit earlier. My wife was 2 years earlier than me in school. Like she was a sophomore. I was a senior. And she decided to transfer to Temple because the school we went to, there's a whole lot to unpack with that, but she didn't like it. And so, and so, so anyway, I graduated a semester early and moved up to Philly, and we were like working for, or I was working there for several years. She was graduating, working and graduating at the same time, and she's like, I really think I want to do like something in the Peace Corps. Like I want to live internationally, and I'm like, all right, well, this is interesting. This is going to be like a different, this is a different trajectory than I've ever experienced. Like I don't even have a passport. Like let's just talk about that for a second. And so, um, we were talking about like what her hopes and dreams were, and I was like, okay, that's really interesting. I'm like, I could get behind doing some Peace Corps thing. I'm just like, I feel like I'm so entrepreneurial. Like I tell people like my first business was like the yellow pages,
Yeah.
this thing that like I don't know, do we still have them anymore?
Oh.
Anyway, there was this company, this competitor company called Yellow Book, right? And they came into Richmond and
Mm-hmm.
got all my friends, and I was like, hey guys, like let's get together and like go deliver these things. I figured out a way to like make, I don't know, $30 an hour, $40 an hour doing this. And like, so what we did is like, we like mapped out, like we created like a little logistics. We weren't factoring in like the wear and tear on our cars or anything. Like we were, 17 years old, but, um, I've always been entrepreneurial. I've always been trying to pull the team together to like come up with the next way to like do something like more efficiently and easily. And so, I told my wife, I'm like, I'll do this thing. I'll go with you somewhere, but I want to pull a team together and I want to start something on our own. Or at least like be like a subsidiary, some sort of like program within a large organization somewhere. And she's like, I don't want to do any of that stuff, but I'm down with like the international development. So like, let's work together. And so like, basically over the course of like 4 months, we pulled a team together and of like-minded people and said, hey, we're thinking about doing some sort of economic development in Latin America. What do you all think? And then we mapped out like whole feasibility study. Like we're going to go to these countries and we're going to do this stuff. And we knew we wanted it to be in Latin America because my wife spoke Spanish fluently and was a Latin American studies major. And then so we pulled other people with Spanish skills in, and just like did the whole thing, like did what we do now for like what we get paid to do. And we just analyzed like, okay, here are the different markets, here are the places with better internet, here are the places with more poverty, here are the places that have like economic opportunity gaps, and Nicaragua just like rose to the top. Haiti was number one, but Haiti, not being Spanish speaking and not having stable government, was never like a play for us. So Nicaragua was the second most impoverished in the Western Hemisphere, pretty decent infrastructure. And so we chose that. And then we didn't even know we were going to do microlending when we went down. But when we went down, we sort of did an analysis, and not to tell you the whole history of lending in Nicaragua, but right around 2009, basically there were a bunch of banks in there charging like 120, 150% interest,
Oh,
annual
wow.
interest, for people to borrow like 10, 20, $50
Oh, wow.
to start or expand their businesses. And so like the usury was just so insane that that basically the president, Daniel Ortega at the time, he basically said, hey, everyone, stop paying your loans. It was called the No Pago movement. And so he said, we're going to teach these banks what's up. And so he told them not to pay their loans. And so all the banks were defaulting, losing money left and right, and they all left the country, like all of them. They stopped lending there,
Mm.
period. There was still some commercial lending and stuff. And what was unfortunate about that whole thing was there were a lot of banks that were doing the right thing, like Kiva-backed banks that were lending, at 20 or 30% interest, which was the right amount for these small loans. They weren't getting repaid either, and they had to leave. And so
Mm.
we saw that gap, and we're like, all right, these people still need this money. They still need access to capital. That's how people can get lifted out. Like, what if we don't charge interest and have our donors pay for the interest? And
Mm.
so we created this model where it was 0% interest model. And like I don't know, we had a couple thousand loan recipients at our peak in 2016, 2017. So it was
Wow.
pretty wild, pretty crazy, and like really impactful. Like we just went back, took my whole family. I have 4 kids under 8, and all 4 of them, they came with us, and we went to our old communities where we used to work, and we still work. And It's just so different. There's like concrete houses, like versus like plastic, and
Wow.
it's a
Oh,
very different place.
wow.
So
That's
cool.
amazing.
So yeah, just to see that lasting impact is pretty awesome. So
Yeah, that's so
yeah,
fulfilling. Oh my gosh.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
That's the real work, right? Like
yeah.
that's like, like I think the work we do is pretty cool, and like, we're helping people become more efficient. But man, like just actually helping people like literally leave, raise themselves out of poverty is pretty wild. So
Yeah.
yeah,
That's so amazing. You know,
yeah,
it's like it's so funny, Alex, because so I went to Zambia a couple years ago
cool.
for work, and there the people are so friendly, very, very friendly, happy people. But with the local school, there's kids that walk 5 miles, and
Yeah,
it's just insane. Like they don't have light to do their homework at night, for example. So very, very low infrastructure. But it's like I always have like a long-term goal where I want to, do some type of thing for Zambia. And so it's like hearing your story like totally inspires me, and I'm going to keep that goal,
heck yeah,
just because it's hard for me to wrap my mind around like how can some of these countries just stay in that space, like the impoverished space, but then again they're such an easy target for corruption.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
I will not have recorded statements about my feelings about a lot of things, but
Yes.
but needless to say, I think there's a lot of opportunity for improvement, and I think it's a multimodal challenge, right? It's not just leadership, it's not just economic opportunity, it's not just technology access, it's all of the
A
above,
lot.
and it's systems thinking. And I think when organizations and governments, they collaborate more, they can really make a huge difference in communities. And we're already seeing that in sub-Saharan Africa, right? Like the technology gap that used to exist, they are able to um, jump like multiple decades of progress through
Hmm.
like cellular technologies and things like that. And that's part of the game, right? So like some of these countries that have more stable governments, like they are able to succeed, but then they need small programs. It's like little things like just getting access to, I don't know, some medical equipment, or
Hmm.
access to information. Like there's this awesome company here in Vermont called ThinkMD, and they just provide medical information to people in rural areas that they can download or access if they do have internet access. And you know, someone like you or me could walk in and help diagnose someone with these workflows that they have, right? So it's
Mm.
like that kind of
Hmm.
sys thinking where it's like, okay, there's a medical challenge, like let's address that. Like they may or may not have access to technology, let's try to address that. So it's just like like having folks like them collaborate with the governments and collaborate with like organizations like Population Media Center that are like trying to run education campaigns about like fertility and safe sex acts, and like things like that. It's like that whole combination, right? But it's not, you or I aren't going to figure it out on our own, but like if we can pull the right people together, it gets
Right.
interesting for sure.
Yeah. You have my mind like
Yeah, yeah,
wheels
we'll
down.
work on that later.
Yeah, because there's like there's this one guy I met, and he has like a nonprofit as well where they do trips to Zambia, and they have like a doctor come in into the rural areas and treat people. But it sounds like they would also be really beneficial from the company you just mentioned about like the step by step workflows, because then that could take care
Yeah,
of the people who can't see the doctor, for example.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting. It's not perfect, right? Because it would be
Mm-hmm.
great if we had a physician in the area,
Right.
and like that would be perfect, right? But we don't have that. So what's the next best thing? Like, is there a way to train some folks at a certain tier of knowledge, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then just give people like common sense workflows. It's no different than what physicians do here. Like, what do you? I mean, you've been in a hospital, right? Like, you see the physician. Like my orthopedic surgeon friend is like Googling stuff, like not Googling, but like looking at
Yeah, looking
things
stuff
up. He's
up.
like,
Yeah.
he has a good idea, but he knows what he's looking for. But at the end of the day, he's just looking just like we would, right? And so if there was something that could take you through the process, right, where it's like, hey, 9 times out of 10, this is probably, dengue or something. Yeah, that would be
Mm-hmm.
amazing for these communities where people are just like bleeding out because they just lack knowledge, right? And
Yeah.
they could get the medication if they knew which medication to take, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
yeah.
Yep. That
Wow.
makes sense. So, what would you say was like your top 3 to 5 takeaways from running your nonprofit in Nicaragua?
Um, one biggest thing is like nothing, nothing that we deal with is anywhere near as important as we think it is, when you put it into perspective of what people deal with on a daily basis down there. And what's awesome about Nicaraguans is, oh my goodness, people are so happy, and it's probably the same in Zambia, right? Like, it's when you have so little, every little thing means so much. And here it's so easy to take things for granted. I do it every day. And then my wife and I constantly remind ourselves, like, just remember our perspective and like our place in life. So, just really having perspective was a huge part of that experience. Um, Jumping into uh, service delivery with people that had this acute need that we were able to solve. That taught me that, one, it's possible to have a direct impact on folks in like a very real way, just by making a decision and doing it, like, period. And I realized that that needed to be part of whatever I did in my life, right? And it even carries into my for-profit now, where we have a pro bono arm, and we try to only work with companies that have a net positive impact. We're committed to increasing our teams right now to delivering 75% of our services to nonprofits in the next 5 years. Like, all those things, like, it's not like we forgot. It's not like I forgot that we need to be service oriented, but what I realized is that, like, we can be service oriented even in a for-profit setting. So that was a really cool lesson that came back to me like years later after starting
Yeah.
the nonprofit. And the other thing was like being very okay with iterating, and like just literally throwing your first idea and your second idea and your third idea in the garbage, right? So I learned, I was, how old was I don't know, I was like in my mid 20s, early 20s, to be able to learn that lesson of like, it's okay to just dump things. We're used to, in school we're taught, you have to get your A, right? So there's like this right way to do these things, right? And when you do these things in this order, there's this formula and it's success, right? And there's no like restarting it or dumping it. It's all very binary. It's yes or no. And what's interesting about the real world is that it's anything but binary. And so if you can fail early, now it's so common, it's like fail early and fail often, right? It's like everyone talks about it, right? But in early 2010s, that wasn't super apparent, especially in development, especially when you're dealing with donor money. It's like, do you fail early and often or not? Like, or do you commit to things you said you were going to do these things? And so we just figured out that balance of like, hey, let's test this thing, call it a test, right? And then if there's hope for success, then let's iterate and make that better. If it's a complete failure, be okay with it and figure out what you can learn from it and start something new. And so with our economic development projects, like we actually tried a multi-pronged approach and realized that we were there for microlending. Like that was all we needed to focus on. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and even with our microlending program, it was like, okay, first we started with purely individuals distributed. And then we decided, all right, like let's lend, not do group lending where everyone's responsible for paying back the loan, but let's do group lending from the perspective of if anyone in your group like bails and disappears, like we can't relend to your group, right? So there's that cultural impact that happens. And then we learned, like, okay, now we can increase the size of our loans. So like there was always this like iteration that was happening and abandonment of bad ideas, or maybe like ideas that just didn't work, right? I don't even want to call
Mm-hmm.
them bad ideas, right? So those are like the big things for me. Really just learning that like it's very okay to like dump something that's not good,
Yeah.
right? So
So, how long would you give yourself to test something before you realize it's not a good idea for the
awesome.
situation?
Yeah, awesome question. Um, it really does depend, right? Like I do it, like my team does it today, and it's still like it like makes it. Talk to any of my team members, right? Like they cringe sometimes because I'm just like, why are you doing this? Like, what's like I know that you just spent like the last month working on this, but like we thought it was going to do this and it's not doing this. So like can we improve it? Can we make it do the thing that we thought it was going to do or not? Right. And if the answer is no, like just dump it. Like we got plenty of other ideas going on. And so, I do think that's a really good question. Right. And I don't think there is a clear answer for it. I think it does depend on your tolerance for risk. Right. So going back to project management, right. Like what's your risk tolerance? What's your budget? Right. Like, you know, some would argue that what we did with Obamacare was a $250 million disaster right here in Vermont. But like to me, I'm like, no, I'm very proud of what we did here, right? Like we achieved the mission, right? Could we have done it better? Absolutely. Like, but you know, we figured out like 2 or 3 months into it, or 2 or 3 months, 2 or 3 years into it, that like, okay, we can keep these pieces and we can dump these pieces, right? And this is all we need, and we can do these things manually, and we can do these things in an automated fashion. And so, like, it was constant. Like, I mean, we were spending millions of dollars and spending years making decisions about whether to go a direction or not. And so in those cases, like sometimes a year is okay, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes it's like literally weeks, right? Like might run a marketing campaign where we're trying to do outreach to nonprofit leaders, and it's like these people are not talking to us at all. They have no interest in who we are and what we can offer, right? So let's pivot and like talk to these other folks. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I really do think it just depends on the conditions, right, and the risk tolerance and the budget you have.
Yeah. Yeah. And then also the potential impact of it as well, right?
Oh,
So,
of
yeah.
course, yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
Great call out there. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we spoke about the nonprofit in Nicaragua. We spoke
Yeah,
about, well, with the Obamacare. So, because that was right after Nicaragua,
yeah.
was there anything else you wanted to highlight about just that whole time of you being an independent consultant and trying to get Obamacare up and running in Vermont?
Yeah, that was interesting. In fact, like I wasn't just an IC throughout that whole thing. Corporate America is very interesting, right? Because CGI was like, "Hey, Alex, we love you as an independent consultant, but that's not going to happen anyway." So like, they're like, "We want you to lead some stuff, and so like, we want you to come in house." And so that was my first foray into management consulting in a formal setting, and it was cool. I learned so much there. and then they got booted out, and then a company called Optum came in and took over the project. And basically, if I wanted to stay on the project, I had to hop over to them. So like I actually joined two different management consulting firms in like, I don't know, a couple of years, which is crazy. And like, I mean, oh my God, some of my best friends are still from both of those teams. And but anyway, what was so interesting about that whole endeavor? I remember it was October 2013. We were supposed to go live. Um, like the news was like newscasters were there, like right outside of the building. We had our big Google Analytics board up, and Odie Ruth, he was sitting right there over his keyboard. He had everything. He had the script ready, and then we were standing over his shoulder. There were like 15 of us, including deputy commissioner, like all these different people. And he hit the button, right? And I just remember, oh my God, that was such like we worked 100-hour weeks, not an exaggeration, not hyperbole.
Yeah,
100-hour weeks, and I don't know how good the work was in that 100 hours, but we were physically in the building, sleeping on our desks, like getting this thing out the door. And Odie hit the button, and there was just this amazing sense of pride that like, look, the state employees were there, tons of contractors were supporting the state. We were the vendor, most hated group, but also like most appreciated group too.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
We all came together, and when that button was hit, everyone was pumped. And when the site started to crash about 2.5 minutes later, that was sad, but but it was all these like lessons learned, right? Like, you know, we had no choice. Like we were mandated to go live at that time. So like we had to do what we had to do. And honestly, we kept pivoting and learning from that the entire time, right? And you know, what was interesting, like the coolest thing I thought about what we were doing was at CGI and Optum, we were such a culturally and geographically diverse team, right? Like everyone from all over the country was flying in to do this. Like our team, we had a huge team in India, physically in India, huge team that was physically in India, like got flown to the United States and like was in this building. They were culturally out of their element in such a crazy way. You know, there was all this stuff. And so what was neat about that was like, you know, a state that's like geographically, I'm sorry, like very like not diverse from a racial perspective or from a origin perspective. It was really interesting to mix all those cultures together into one building and like be on the same team. That was very, very fascinating. And then also understanding how politics work, like that was the wildest thing, because man, that most of the thing, like we could have done a better job if politics weren't part of it, but politics were part of it. And you just have to realize that that's part of the game, right? Whether it's like governmental politics or office politics or anything else, right? Like there's so much to take into account there. And as project managers, like that's one of the hardest things to navigate too. So like just that was my biggest like lesson there when I was at that program, because you know we had 500 people working on a project, you know, all working together, all with varying skills, communication skills, technical skills, analytic skills, all that stuff. So
Yeah. Yeah. You know, politics is a thing. Like, for me, I just want to get my job done and do a good job. So then when it comes to politics, like, I don't even know if I navigate them well. Sometimes I think I'm too direct. Like, so how are you able to just, I guess, learn, I guess, lack of a better word, learn the game that was going on during that time?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing, especially being a project manager, is you have to just not take things personally, right? It doesn't mean that you can't stand up for yourself or stand up for your team or do that kind of stuff, like because we do that on a daily basis, right? Like that's part of our job, is to make sure that people understand when they're doing harm to each other, like verbally, emotionally, whatever. And we need to communicate our needs, right? Like no question. But sometimes politics just come into play. Like, won't name names, but like we were on call with the governor. Okay. We were up all night the night before, like making sure that people could get access to Medicaid. So all the Medicaid ran through our system, and there were problems with our systems. We had defects, but like the our team stayed up until 4 o'clock in the morning, making sure that all of these people had all the access they needed in the systems, and all that information got sent out to all the carriers. And someone from the state didn't do their job, right? And it was a leader at the state, and we figured it out way later. And then we helped them resolve it. And then we were on the call with the governor, and he was shouting at all of us. Like, we were all on the same team, sort of like the state and the vendor. And he was just like, what the heck were you all thinking? And then this leader lied, like straight up lied, and said, Optum didn't do their job, and they didn't do this thing. And I had the option to correct. We all knew in the room, including them, that we did our job, and that we cared so much. Like, we were all Vermont residents that were up till 4 o'clock in the morning. We cared about our neighbors getting access to their Medicaid services, and so we didn't call this person out. We just let it happen, and then we pulled the person in the room, and we just said, Did you know that this is what was happening? And she's like, yeah, I know. I had to lie to make sure that the governor could push your team to blah, 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 blah. We're like, oh my God. Like, are you serious? Like, it just felt so wrong in so many ways. Just something I would never do. And, but then that's where the politics comes into play, right? Because I know that for her, it was very important for her to maintain whatever like face she needed to have with the governor, and instead of just calling her out and like having this big fight there, we took it and then we addressed it and we explained why it was a problem for us. We never got through to that person, right? But everyone on the state side did understand, except for the governor. And so, but just understanding and not taking it personally is probably like the hardest thing to do from a political perspective. That was an office politics and a literal politics example, but like that is the kind of stuff that, as like real leaders, you just have to understand that, look, it's not personal. At the end of the day, people are scared and they're making decisions. You do have to address them and you have to correct them, but like, it's not personal, right? So anyway.
Yeah. But even it's funny, like even outside of like, a literal political space, people always love to blame the vendor.
Oh, I know. It's so easy. I do it all the time. I mean, that's the nice thing. Like, I'm just like, oh, this vendor. No, but having been on the vendor side so much, like our team, like as project managers, sometimes we're on the vendor side and sometimes we're on the client side. Mm-hmm. We love being on the client side because we know we can get the most value out of the investment for the client. But sometimes we tell the client, like, hey, look, we need to do a good job of getting the vendor all the information that they need. We need to own up when we make mistakes, right? And so, like, not every project manager has been on the vendor side, so they just think like the vendor is supposed to do whatever the heck the customer says. So anyway.
Yeah, I've been on both sides too.
Yeah.
Like, what? like being on the vendor side versus on the client side. Like, there was places I've worked and, we're on the client side and oh my God, we would beat the vendor up so bad, But then when I'm on the vendor side, I'm like, are you guys nuts? Like, I literally sent you 500, 600 emails about this, and what? Like,
oh my goodness. Yeah, and it's interesting though. I think that like what it comes down to is this very human reaction to. There's usually two things going on with that, at least from my perspective, right? The first is like that faceless person or group is so easy to blame, right? It's the same way that like if you've never met someone from a particular culture and you know all these stereotypes that exist with that, you know, you have this view of this random person that
Yeah.
is negative, right? It's the stereotypical view. And then when you actually meet a person from that view, like it's or from that background, it's like, oh wow, like my stereotypes were completely wrong. Or sometimes people are like, oh, you're not like these other hypothetical other things, right? And so
Yeah.
with the vendor, a lot of times it's like, oh, this vendor is based in like some other country or some big city. And even though like you might be mad at the person that works for that vendor, you're really mad at the vendor because it's just this like other entity, right? So
Yeah.
that's the first thing. And then the second thing is like we have a really screwed up view, like as a society. I think it's a uniquely American thing, or maybe like a Western thing, where we just feel entitled that like if we're receiving a service that
Yeah.
like that whole like customers always right thing is like
Yeah.
crazy, right? Like it's so crazy, and it's not like it's bad for the customer to think that way because like the customer could actually just if they just turned it around a little bit and said like what can I do to make this journey better for the vendor and for me, they would get stuff done faster, they would get more
Yeah.
value out of it. Like
Yeah.
there's so much there instead of like trying to fight that and blame the other person. So anyway,
Yeah. 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 That's a really good point. No, that's a really good point. Because it definitely is that otherness. Oh my gosh. Yeah. The otherness is like insane.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's like you don't get me. And it's like it's so funny with Optum and CGI. Like literally over half of the people were like Vermont residents that were being employed by these companies, right? Like Jessica, I was like one of the biggest donors of this. There's this group here called Vermont Digger, VT Digger. It's an online news source that's funded by donors, right? Digger did a freaking expose on me and my team.
Oh my gosh.
I'm like, check your donor rolls, guys. No, I'm just kidding. I think that they should always like. I mean, like there should be transparency in all of this stuff, and that's why I donate to them. But like, dang, that just they got it wrong. They got it so wrong, um, and
Oh
it
my
was sad.
gosh.
It was sad, especially because like half of the people that they criticized were Vermonters that like cared so much about helping other Vermonters get
Mhm.
like affordable access to insurance and Medicaid.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
oh well,
It's like so easy to criticize people for doing something, but it's like I take a step back and I'm like, before I even criticize, could I do what they're even trying to do?
yeah,
Like that was a very hard endeavor that you went on, like so
yeah.
it's crazy.
No, I mean like funny not work related story. Like my wife and I live on an 8-acre farm in the middle of Underhill, Vermont, out in the middle of nowhere. And one of our next door neighbors, she sold her house. She had some medical issues. Quickly sold her house to a developer, and then the developer came in. A small developer came in and just started like knocking down trees next to us. Didn't come talk to us. Didn't do anything. Just started knocking down trees. And my wife and I were so like heated. I mean, we should have been heated in some way. Like they could have come over and talked to us, but we were like this otherness of this person,
Yeah.
right? That I didn't even interact
Who's
with. I'm
this
like,
guy?
what's wrong with this person? And I'm like, I'm just gonna go talk to this person and see what's up. And then they were like the nicest person. They're like, I got my job cut out for me, like, and I'm just like, dude, could you come knock on my door or something? Like, but then he like became not this other person, right? He
Yeah.
became this other human that is just trying to do a thing, right? And then that helped me and my wife like become way less mad. But also it allowed for us to create this dialogue and this creation of understanding. And we were able to explain to him, hey, look, I know you're trying to create more space, but like, can you leave a couple of trees so that like this new neighbor who is also going to want privacy can also have privacy from us?
Mhm.
And so we just had this conversation. He's like, oh yeah, that's a good idea, right? And so, but this otherness creates all this hostility that like you don't even realize
Yeah.
that even when you're trying to work on that stuff, we're all susceptible to it. So.
Yeah. And look, you turn the hostility into a working relationship so you can have a win-win for everybody, you know?
That's right. We have a little trail that connects the two properties now, so it's all good. Oh yeah, I
Oh,
love it.
so funny.
Cool.
Okay, so the last piece is we're gonna fast forward a little bit to today, and with how you grew from an independent consultant to growing consulting group. What was that journey like?
Yeah, good question. So after I worked on Obamacare for a couple of years, I went back out and did independent consulting, again under the same brand. And then one of my clients said, "Hey, Alex, you're really good at sales. You're upselling for us, even though you don't work for us. You should come in and build a practice here." And I'm like, I already did that twice, and that didn't work out for me. I don't think I'm a big corporate company guy. And he said, "Alex, we're not a big corporation. We're a small management consulting firm, boutique regional consulting firm." And I was like, "Yeah, you're right about that." And I'm like, "But here's the deal. Like, I like to work on the things I like to work on. I want to have impact, all this stuff." And he's like, "You can do that here. You can build out this practice here." And so I went there, and I was there for 8 months and realized it was the exact thing as the other two places. And it's not because that place is awesome. Like, I actually tell people to go work there often.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not for me, right? And I didn't have the flexibility to, you know, charge the states less and charge nonprofits less and do pro bono projects. And there was a culture challenge with being able to recruit females and people of color to be retained for long periods of time because people couldn't see the growth opportunity because they didn't see people that looked like them in leadership roles, right? And there was no action to make that happen, right? And they're still struggling with it. They're trying, but they still are losing people of color and young people in general, but especially young females left and right. And it's not their problem. It is an everything problem. I mean, you left management consulting too, probably for different reasons, but still, it's fair enough. All right, that's a whole thing we'll unpack later too, right? But I was trying to give them the benefit of the doubt, but but yeah, trying to not get us sued. So anyway, the no, I'm just kidding. But it was an as one of my old colleagues said, it was an opportunity rich environment that I did not want to participate in and help move that opportunity forward. So 5 years ago, I was like, all right, guys, love the people that are here. I love the opportunities to work with these big states. Like, we were literally like trying to, like, we got called, like, the West Virginia government said, "Hey, like, can you help us like make our kids not die in the child welfare system?" Right? Like, that's the kind of pull that this company had, and they were doing real things like that, right?
Yeah.
But internally, I just felt like I couldn't move the needle fast enough from a team perspective, and for that reason, I had to leave. And so 5 years ago, I left, and I was like, "Hey, let's do this thing." I like building teams. I really enjoyed that piece of it, but there's so much other stuff, right? Like, I don't want to just work in one vertical, right? I don't want to work in a bigger company in one vertical. Like, I want to work with a bunch of different clients. And so, and I'm like, all right, so that I know. And I want to work with more people of color and females in strong leadership roles, right? And I want to create opportunities for people in management consulting to have that opportunity that, they have the skills, but they aren't compensated the way that they should be compensated. So, like, how do we create opportunities there? And so basically, over the first 2 years of relaunching, we were crafting the model. We were like, how do we attack some of these challenges, like the social challenges that we're trying to face? And then also, like, how do we create something that the market wants, right? And so and what we figured out was, or what I knew that I stuck with some of the things that I knew I was really strong in, right? Like I was in the health and human services space, in project management, like I was strong, right? Like I had 250 connections that I could have be on my projects and also buy my services. And so, I got super narrow there, focused on project management, focused on healthcare for a while, and just really drove that home. And then we started to shape like what our economic model looked like. And we knew that small businesses were pretty much getting left behind with management consulting services, or they didn't even realize that they could benefit from them or afford them. And so I'm like, all right, how do I find people that used to work in management consulting at bigger firms and pay them more than what they used to get paid at those firms, and offer a rate that was significantly cheaper than any of the management consulting firms, like to the tune of one quarter to one fifth of the cost of other management
Yeah.
consulting firms, even like the mid to low tier
Mm-hmm.
firms. And so, like, how do we do that? And I was like, that economically won't make sense. And then I did the math, and then I was like, oh, we still have profit margins of 30%. Like what the heck was going on? Like at these other firms. Were they really inefficient? No, like all the money was going to the principals. But that's a different thing to tackle at some point. But what we figured out was that we could still serve this unrepresented demo in these small businesses and nonprofits that don't get the kind of services that we are able to offer for somewhere between like 100 and 250 bucks an hour, right? Like that's not nothing, but it's a serious investment, but it's so much cheaper than the rates we were billing back in the day, right, Jessica? And so um, that's what we really focused on. So now, we it was funny. I think we started, so it's before, so like into 2019, early 2020, we relaunched. COVID happened, and we grew 1,700% year over year. It was ridiculous. And what was interesting was the economic conditions really supported what we were doing, because a lot of these small businesses had to shave off a lot of their like every single expense that they had, but they still needed to deliver services. And so we really focused on small services companies, and we provided project managers to them on an as-needed basis, and they were still able to bill their clients what they needed to and still achieve their profit margins. So like we were just really well positioned for COVID to happen and the economic downturn to happen. And then when the economic upturn happened, we were already planted and got our reputation, and then we were able to ride that wave too.
Yeah.
So it's just been awesome. We're up to like 60 people on our bench right now. And we're working with like really cool companies. Thrive Health is like this awesome company that does like diabetes care. It's coaching and like advising, and also like diabetes management capabilities. We've been doing work. We did work with public broadcasting system. Like we've done, like, I mean, it's just like really meaningful stuff we're working on right now.
Yeah.
Not to mention all of our pro bono clients that I could talk about all day. But yeah, it's just like we're actually having impact, have a very financially successful business, and we're employing a lot of people from like random walks of life, like people that live in the middle of nowhere USA, right? Like that would have zero economic opportunity if they couldn't work remotely for the
Yeah.
Silicon Valley and New
Yeah.
York based companies. So
Yeah. That's
yeah,
amazing. Especially now with like all these companies are mandating people to return to office. So there's even
let
less
them do it.
remote opportunities. Yeah.
Jessica, all day, like, please, every single one of you, please ask your people to go back into the office. Like, that is the best recruitment tool for me, for sure.
I know it is, right? So, what would you say has been the most challenging thing to tackle as you've been scaling versus the most rewarding?
Yep. Um, Anyone that's listened to me talk on any of these podcasts knows my biggest failure, by far, like my number one biggest failure over the past 5 years, has been underestimating the impact that hiring quickly will have on the people that already are there and the people that are coming in. And what I mean by that is like, so we use a hybrid model. So we went from like 3 employees to 15 employees in like 8 months, very quickly. Plus all the contractors that we had, they're also on our bench, and we we had the need from a project perspective to do that, and our growth supported it. Um, and everyone that I interviewed and everyone internally was excited about the growth. What we all underestimated, and me as the leader, what I underestimated more than anything was that that type of growth in an early stage company is very challenging for folks. Like people don't even realize that like, oh wow, I was having like multiple one-on-ones with Alex every single like week, and
Um,
now I see him once every 2 weeks. And now the thing that I was doing for this client, 7 of us are doing that for different clients now, right? And so nothing seems special. Everyone still had the same voice, everyone still had that stuff, but like I just underestimated. On the Optum team, I grew like at one point I grew the team from like 50 or 60 people to like 250 people like in months, and um, they were all new hires, and it was so easy. Like we gelled so well, we had everything. Our culture was right, everything was good. So I was overconfident about my ability to scale from 2 to 15. Come on, like that's nothing.
mm,
But it was super impactful, and culturally, like it was a really tough challenge. And so what we figured out was like, hey, we needed a little bit of a different model, and now we're adding employees much slower. We plan to be there again. It's just, and frankly, financially, we could get there quickly. It's really culturally, we want to make sure that everyone feels good about the direction we're going, and they still
mm.
feel like they have a really strong place in the organization.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I wouldn't think that the challenge came from basically people not feeling close to you anymore. And
Yeah, or just
that
like
you
important. Like it's just, I mean, it's so interesting because that's all we want in life, right? So like it's hard to generalize about every single human on earth, right? But like generally speaking, we all want to fit in, but we all want to be unique, right? And
yeah.
so we don't want to stand out for the things we don't want to stand out for, right? But we do want to be valued in whatever group we're in. And that's where like you can tell like people that feel dissatisfied with their work or with their family life or their life in general, it's like usually that's what's missing, right? Like they either stand out too much because they're too different, or they don't fit in because of X, Y, and Z. And so um, that's what I underestimated with all of this was like, even though we said the things, like I said all the things, right? And we did all the things, um, you still can't replace the feeling that people have with the way things are changing. Plus, people hate change too. So it's like,
Yeah.
that like it's not that we didn't underestimate we did not underestimate the impact of change with folks, but we did underestimate the way people would feel about the change. So
Interesting.
yeah,
Huh. Yeah.
yeah,
And I guess the difference from when we're scaling from like 60 people, it's already pretty big.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
already pretty big. So like so from 60 to 250, I feel like the gap between like the change of feelings wouldn't be that much versus like, if I'm talking to you every other day and I call you randomly and you're available versus I'm talking to you twice in a month and I can't call you randomly anymore. Yeah, that's a pretty
yeah,
big gap.
yeah. And having Optum, for all the good and bad that they get, they they are a well-oiled machine, and so if you have a challenge with one individual, you can communicate that challenge to an HR team, and you can say, hey, look, like I'm having this thing, how would you approach this, how do we want to address it? There's a lever that you can pull, right?
Hmm.
But in a small organization, um, you have such close relationships with each person. Um, and it's not that, look, I'm not scared to have a conversation with someone that might hurt their feelings, right? I'll try to. I'm empathetic, right? Like I want them to feel good about the outcome of that conversation, but it's just different where you just don't have as many levers to pull. You can pull in any consultant that you want, but if you're just not like if you don't have that team to rely on, it's really 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 tough. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, I
yeah.
understand. Yeah, I understand. Like, I would say like my husband's music school, it's, it's pretty tight knit. So he is the HR person, he's the everything. And I know there's like so many times where he doesn't even want to deal with something sometimes. So I'm like, babe, come on, like
Yeah.
it's your responsibility. But yeah, I completely understand. There isn't that extra, that third party that can just help navigate the muddiness.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
But then you did ask. So you asked about the bad and the good, right?
yeah.
And so um, the thing I'm proudest about is you know, we actually proved that this model can work, right? It's not perfect. We're not huge yet. We'll see if it can scale. Um, it's scaled a lot, but can it scale, right? That's the big question. Um, we're proving that you can have a focus on creating an environment where um, you have a diverse set of team members that can really add value to groups that never might have gotten access to that diverse level of thinking, right? Even putting like someone from like Mississippi, we have Berlinty in Mississippi, right? Like, putting her on a project with like a team in Jamaica or a team in, like New York City or Silicon Valley, that changes things. Like
Yeah.
she asks awesome questions that like people don't get. Like people would have never thought to ask those things. And especially when you start to think about like we're producing these products, right? Like Dietharb is a great example. They're based in Utah, right? Um, you know, pretty affluent area, very homogeneous, like white, very white population. They're producing diabetes care products, right? Like, you know, which is hits
Yeah.
more impoverished areas,
Yeah.
hits communities of color and all that stuff. And so to be able to inject different people with different perspectives, with actual human experiences with diabetes that might not um, you might not be able to recruit that from where you're at in that geographic
Yeah,
epicenter. Like
that's true.
that is where I'm really proud that we're able to provide that level of diversity. And it's not just about racial or racial, religious, any of those kinds of diversity. Like it's literally everything. Like I love getting like someone that served like a veteran on a project with like a nonprofit that like just doesn't understand, like that has never had that perspective before of the
Yeah.
structure. And so like and we're not just doing it for the sake of doing it. We're like really doing it because culturally that person can fit into that organization and they can enhance what some of the blind spots that team has, right? And so I'm proud to be able to do that while still creating an economic model that makes sense.
Mhm.
And all the folks that are living in these more geographically you know they're sort of like deserts where with opportunity, local opportunities, being able to create the economic opportunity for those folks to work on projects and generate double triple what they could locally is huge. And then to be able to focus on companies that are providing a service that actually is going to have a net positive impact on people's lives, like that, like is the best thing. I won't name company names, but like I love like the first time that I turned down a project from a company that did not have values that aligned with us.
Mhm.
Like that was when we knew we made it. Cause like, I mean, I didn't make that decision on my own. I asked the team, I was like, hey, look, this is probably $1 million contract that we'd be turning down. they're like, yeah, this doesn't fit our values, and we'll make it up in other places. And so like that, being able to get to that point where we can like not take on projects that don't match our values, that's huge for us. And so
Yeah.
that's, I mean, I would just say anyone can do that. Like we can all make that decision at some point, right?
Yeah.
That we can just do the right thing. So
Yeah. Oh, that's so amazing. That's really amazing. Because I feel like some companies are just so focused on their profit, their metrics, their KPIs, their shareholders, whatever. They do whatever it takes to make sure they get those numbers. But then a consequence, the company culture just starts to tank, and then it turns into something that they probably the original founders did not intend for it to turn into. So
that's
that's
right.
like, yeah.
Yeah, that's
Mm-hmm.
a really great point, Jessica. And what's so nice about working with small businesses and nonprofits, um, it's that most of them, unless they're PE backed or venture backed, which is where we get into a little bit of the same kind of funkiness. But um, there's there's the there's so much flexibility. Like it really does come down to um, what are the values of the leadership and what are the values of the organization. Does that permeate through the entire organization? And if it does, then they will say no to those things, right? And they'll value the things that we value too. And that's what we're looking for in the interviews. I always try to talk to leadership as much as I can through the sales process, and I always ask them, like, show me someone that is absolutely crushing it. Like let me interview someone that's crushing it, that we'd be working with, and let's see what kind of culture fit we have with that, right? And what that allows for us to do is understand, like, okay, is the leadership really good at explaining stuff and putting on the smoke and mirrors, or does that permeate through the entire organization? Because if it does, then we'll do a better job at that place, and we'll have values alignment, and be able to help them
Mm-hmm.
as much as we can. So,
Mm-hmm. Oh,
so
that's so nice. That's so nice, Alex. So, we've been at this for about an hour now, and I know your time is precious. So, my one last final question: if you were to give younger Alex advice, let's say 20-year-old Alex, based off what you know today, what would it be?
I think that's an easy one, but it's just such a cheat, right? It's a cheat code for the video game, right? So I think I don't regret things in my life, right? Like I really do think that every piece of my life was an important, like it fed into who I became, right? I learned so much in that period. But I will say, if I had better mentors when I was younger, like in my teenage years, I think that I might have skipped I might have skipped the finance period of my life, right? Like I might have tried to study something that might have been a little bit more in line from a values perspective of like what I grew up with and then what I'm doing now, right? And so I think that phase of my life was just not as productive as it could have been, right? And so what I tell really young people, right, like even pre 20 year old Alex's, is like really try to find mentors that can help you fill blind spots where like other people aren't filling, right? Like so for me, like understanding what college really could have been and what a career looked like would have been huge for me, right? And so that's why I try to give my advice to as many young people as will listen to me, even though sometimes they don't want to listen. So it's a good taste of my own medicine, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah. That's yeah. I would agree with that one. The whole mentor. Yeah, I think even today I'm still trying to find some mentors. Like, I don't know. How did you, I know that was supposed to be the last question, but
No, it always happens this way.
how do you go about finding your mentors?
It's interesting. I was talking with one of my colleagues who actually is a mentor of mine, but he's like a peer mentor, right? And we were he had this he made a point, and I don't think he really means this, but he was like, are we too old to have mentors? And I'm like, no, we're not too old to have mentors. I'll be a 90-year-old man and have a mentor, but hopefully, if I live that long. But what was interesting about what he said was, I think it was really a semantics thing, right? Like when you get to a point in your career where you're running a company, maybe you started a few companies, or you're very senior within an organization. Sometimes it feels really hard to find someone that will make the time to mentor you. Um, and what I've found has been extremely helpful is I stopped trying to look up and started to look over more. And so I have a lot of peer mentors. So folks that are on the same growth trajectory as me, sometimes slightly higher, sometimes slightly lower, and we all like learn from each other. I have probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 meetings a month with different leaders at different companies. It's so helpful for me. I can like that's where we can talk about like, geez, I'm trying to figure out like what my commission structure should look like for these salespeople. I've never been through this before. Help me think about this. Or, geez, I have this really tough employee that I can't I can't get through with, and like I talked to my HR consultant and they said X. Like, how would you tackle this challenge, right? Like, and those are so helpful for me. Oh my goodness, and they hold me accountable too, because we all like we want each other to succeed, and
Yeah.
we want to like we want to see each other get there, and so I feel pressure from them to do better, right?
Right.
So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's fun.
Oh, that's nice. Thank you so much, Alex. And my favorite part is, where can people find you to connect with you?
Yep. My favorite place to connect is on LinkedIn. I'm very close to 10,000 followers, so please come over there. I'm just, no, it's linkedin.com/in/Alex Tuck. That's my favorite place to connect. You can also email me at alex@tuckconsultinggroup.com. Would love to connect with anyone that wants to have a conversation about project management, get advice, tell war stories, whatever you want. And Jessica, thank you so much for
Of
having me. This was
course.
so fun.
Of course. Thank you for being my guest. I love this conversation. I feel so close to you now. Like, oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Alex.
All right, have a good one.